Hi, this is Ben Llewellyn. How did the Flemish Dutch language influence Scots in a way that's wholly different from English, which made it branch off in a different direction and really make it quite a different language to English? That's what I'm going to tell you in this video. Let's jump into it. Disclamation. That's Scots for a disclaimer. I am not Scottish. I have Scottish ancestry, which I'm very proud of, but I am Welsh and I am Texan by way of Cambridge and many other places. So I'm not going to pronounce every word in Scots perfectly. I'm merely here to show you how beautifully diverse Scots culture and Scotland is. Firstly, what is Flemish Dutch? There's an area called Flanders in Belgium, the northern half essentially. And this region, this cultural region, arose as a county that was pinned between the emerging Frankish kingdom of France between about 800 and 1000 and the Holy Roman Empire, which became the inheritance of Charlemagne the Great. And between these two powers, they had to invent new ways of surviving, and so they became very mercantile, especially around the cities of Ghent, Antwerp, and later Brussels. And from this they became weavers, textile people, and tradesmen of quite high quality. But what happened to get them to Scotland is a roundabout story, so let's begin on that. In 1066, the Normans invaded England. Now, this was not so much an influence into Scotland and Wales yet. That's completely distinct, and I should note that. This was England, and King William the Conqueror had a Flemish contingent in his army, and he brought them over with him and helped settle parts of England. But from this point of the Norman invasion, in every century, every couple generations frankly, there's a strong xenophobic element in English society that has formed its identity in every century. Part of what made the Normans so effective when they invaded England is they had mercenaries from two very highly effective warrior states. One was the Breton, which have a very similar language to Welsh, and the other was Flanders, the Flemish. They brought these two with them across the Channel when they invaded, and they fought at the Battle of Hastings, which defeated the old Saxon kingdom. But when they arrived in Scotland, they didn't have a full frontal conquest at that point. They brought in aristocracy, and when a man arose named King David I, he took a Flemish descended wife, Queen Maud, and she brought whole retinues north from England. Now I need to give context because something quite significant happened during this period. So let's go to Wales. In 1108 and 1113, whole batches of Flemish people were sent to Wales, and we have evidence that Welsh people fled. They were basically pushed out, hunted out of De Sir Benfro, southern Pembrokeshire, and the Flemish language was planted in here. Flemish did not survive in any great extent in Wales. The heritage did, and it's key to what I'm about to tell you, that the Welsh language was completely pushed out of that region and a new identity planted in. So it was very effective and a bit in Gwir, the peninsula over towards Abertawe. Writing in the year 1188, Gerach Gymro, who traveled through Wales writing about the people and the land, had this to say about the Flemish of Sir Benfro. He described them as a brave and sturdy people, a people skilled at working in wool, experienced in trade, ready to face any effort of danger at land or sea in pursuit of gain, according to the demands of time and place, quick to turn to plough or to arms, a brave and fortunate people. So when this was tried up north, it was much more effective for a couple reasons. The Flems who went to Wales were being driven out by King Henry I. There was this xenophobic element in English society towards them at the time, and they were being used as a political weapon to subjugate the Welsh nation. Up north it was quite different with Queen Maud. These retinues went north, and King David, who enacted the Davidian Revolution, changed Scotland forever. Before his reign, I mean, we're talking early 11th century, Scotland had no real towns. By the end of his reign, we're talking over 40 towns. This is revolutionary, and most of them, the vast majority of them, were filled with Flemish people, not Scots. There were Scots in them, but the people who filled these towns were Flemish, French, and the Scots language, which had already begun to emerge, was shifted towards Dutch or Flemish forever, in a way that completely diverges from English, which was arising out of the Saxon language fused with French. So Scots and English went two completely different ways from this period in the 11th century. When King David came to the throne in 1124 in Scotland, he had already held the title Prince of the Cumbrians. And for anyone who's Welsh, familiar with how Wales was conquered, this is quite eerie, because the inheritor of England has traditionally been known now as the Prince of Wales. And so this was already done before. The English were copying what had already been done, and frankly, the English were not very effective. As I'll show you, the Scots were much more effective in colonizing out the Welsh of Scotland. Probably around the 1060s, with England distracted, fighting off, succumbing to the Normans, the Kingdom of Alba wiped out Strathclyde, the Britons or the Welsh there, and absorbed them into the kingdom. However, their identity and their language remained, and that would have been a big problem, because up north you had Moray, which had a Pictish heritage, and they were aware of this, and they were semi-independent, and so the emerging Kingdom of Alba was faced with two political identities, in addition to the Irish, or the Gaels on the west coast of Scotland, and the emerging power of England, a constant threat further south, now added to that with the fighting tenacity of the Normans. And so King David knew that he had to absorb out this Welsh identity, in my opinion, that's what I think, quite fast. And he brought in these Flemish retinues, and he began to build boroughs, settlements, towns, trading posts, often walled with these immigrants. And look where he built them. Here is the Principality of Cumbria that he was entitled to under title. And the first boroughs that we see are in Berwick, Roxburgh, later Peebles and Lanark. These were all areas that would have been very strongly, at least residual at a minimum, Welsh speaking, influenced in some way. And you have Caerdiron, which is quite close to Roxburgh. We know that this was one of the last areas that was Welsh speaking in the north, and that this was also one of the first boroughs built and Flemish planted in there. So this was a way to unify Scotland into a singular identity. The Scots language emerged in this way as an imperial language. It conquered or absorbed out the native Welsh, what was left of them. They weren't very strong at this point. There's historical reasons why. I don't want to go too much into the Welsh element here. I just want to note that from this point of the Flemish coming in to these boroughs, the record of the people with Welsh surnames and hints at Welsh language drops off precipitously. And I personally don't think it's a coincidence. And I personally do think this was an intentional strategy to remove that identity. And there does appear to be efforts at a pushback to keep that language going, but it wasn't effective. The amount of immigrants, the Flemish immigrants coming in, was in the thousands, and they were of the aristocratic class, which meant that the Scots who weren't Welsh speaking would have went toward them, not the rural country bumpkins, which is what the last remnants of the Welsh language in Scotland appear to have become. And that's a warning to the Welsh. If you are not part of the aristocracy or ruling class, and you are pushed back to a rural fringe of farmers, that is how a language dies. You have to take positions of power and economic status to survive long term as a culture, and the Welsh in Scotland didn't, because the Flemish in Scotland did, which has made the Scots language incredibly unique and beautiful. But also towards Glasgow, in this region that prior would have been a stronghold of the British language, you have place names speckling the area that are Flemish. Symington, Flemington, Robertson, Whiston, Lambington. These boroughs were planted in the Valley of Clyde, which would have been very strongly Welsh, at least in memory at minimum. And so this new identity came in, and the Scots language, which was more toward Edinburgh and St Andrews and Dundee, began to expand through these boroughs. And the Kingdom of Scotland grows in strength from this, and the Flemish were brought in, subjugate a rebellion in Moray, allowing Scotland to conquer the north using Flemish mercenaries and troops. They use these Flems to control trade into Flanders. A lot of words entered the Scots language from Flemish Dutch through weaving, wool, textiles, which in English often had a French root. So that's a very marked difference between Scots and English. Let's get some examples of this influence of Flemish Dutch upon Scots. The Flemish language did not survive in Scotland, but it does in a way, because if you hear someone speak Scots, you're always going to pick up Flemish Dutch words. And even the things that people wear are influenced by Flemish Dutch methods of weaving today. And the names of towns and surnames across Scotland today, such as, if you read through Scottish history, you're going to find quite a few names which are, a lot of them, which influence the direction of the Scottish nation. And here are a few of them which are Flemish Dutch. Fleming, not surprisingly. Balliol. Bruce, like Robert the Bruce. Cameron, like the recent Prime Minister. Lindsay, that one's quite common. Common. Crawford, Hay, Murray, Baird. That's quite a significant echo to have upon a country when you can say that our descendants have formed many of your rulers in areas. Many of these names formed the upper crust of Scottish society, and it changed Scotland forever in a way that it wasn't as pronounced in England because it was so Frenchicized, if that's a word. These people influence Scotland in ways that it's difficult to overestimate. You have place names across Scotland with hints of them today, such as so both Moray and Clyde, areas that could have perhaps formed an identity and thrown off Scottish rule, were the regions most settled by Flemish and given title and grants to be loyal to the King of Scotland. Just to give you a vague idea of the influence upon Flemish Dutch upon Scots. So look at this sentence. What are you doing next? What are you doing next? And that last word, next, is pretty much Dutch today for next. Cognate with Welsh, nessa, next. So, what are you doing next? To red up the house and put the house in the bocht. Don't quote my pronunciation, but you get how different that is to English. What does that mean? Tidying up the house and putting the ewes in the barn or the sheepfold. And there's a couple elements there that are different to English, not just the vocabulary, which I'll go through first. Red is to tidy up, which comes from Flemish. And the bocht is straight from Flemish Dutch for a sheepfold. And a lot of these words are going to be more agriculture or weaving based, but it's still a substrat of the Scots language which is going to make many instances not understandable to you if you're speaking English. There's also this instance that tie at the beginning. It means to, but it's used in a grammatical way that's not like English. It means tidying. It's adding the ing at the beginning to make it the constant verb. And that is quite Welsh, actually. That's really Welsh. And I wonder if there's like a British or Irish influence in the structure of Scots there. I don't know. Do you think there's a Celtic influence on the structure of Scots? Let me know down in the comments below. Here are a few words from Scots which are clearly directly from Flemish Dutch. Kerk. And in Dutch or Flemish, kerke. That's church, that's easy. A number, nummer. And the number 8, that's a echt. And in Dutch would be acht. And that sound, that's interesting that it's been kept in Scots. Now there's different pronunciations of it depending on the dialect, but if you had Welsh speakers being assimilated out, they would have reinforced that sound being kept, because it's not a sound they would have given up because it's in Welsh. I don't know if it helped keep it in Scots or not, but it wouldn't have depreciated it. And I just find that interesting as a Welsh speaker that that sound is in Scots. So in English, a stone, like you throw a stone. But in Scots, stain. It's from stain. A daughter, dochter. That sound again. Here's one that I like. Kittelen. From kittelen, Dutch for to tickle, or it tickles. Kittelen. Jammeren. Well, that's the Dutch. Yammering. The crying of a child. And what this is unique for is it's not from that meaning in Flemish Dutch. In Flemish Dutch it means to wail, to lament, like serious grief. But it changed over time to mean the crying of a child, which the word for fast in Dutch is snel. And you can say this for swift in Scots. A snel wind. A swift wind. I mean, these are very nuts and bolts words that you have in Scots from Dutch or Flemish Dutch that you don't have to any great extent in English at all. But one of them you do have in English is golf, which does come from the Scots Flemish Dutch. Originally, the word for a club in Dutch is golf. You can see where that came from. A scone. Scone. How do you pronounce scone? Let me know. Because this is the word it came from. I'm not going to try and pronounce it because I've already mispronounced so many words in this video already. That's just a basic run over of the influence that the Flemish had upon Scotland and its language as well. So if you'd like a more extensive video on that, any specific element, let me know in the comments. Diolch yn fawr iawn am wylio. Thank you very much for watching. We will see you in the next episode.